Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking into a really quite a disturbing story out of New York.
Yeah, it involves a group active for decades using some pretty extreme methods.
Kidnapping, torture, extortion, all apparently to force Jewish men to grant their wives religious divorces.
Yeah,
That
exactly. We've got articles, reports. Our aim here is really just to understand what happened, the motivations, the violence, the legal fallout, how the community reacted.
And just to be clear up front, we're sticking strictly to the information in our sources. No taking sides, no adding our own opinions on the more sensitive aspects.
Absolutely, just laying out what the reports say.
Okay, so maybe we should start with the get itself. Why is it so significant?
Right. So in Haredi Judaism, which is a very observant stream, a civil divorce isn't sufficient.
Okay.
For the religious divorce to be valid, the husband must voluntarily give his wife this specific document, the get.
And if he doesn't?
Well, religiously speaking, she's still married, even if the state says she's divorced.
And that has real consequences.
Huge consequences, especially for future children. If she has children with another man, they could be considered mamzerim.
Which is?
It's a status that carries really significant social stigma within the community. It can affect who they can marry, their standing. It lasts for generations. It's a profound issue.
So the stakes are incredibly high for the woman.
Immensely high. Now, Jewish law, halakha, it does have ways to encourage a husband who's refusing. Community pressure, shunning, things like that.
But not violence, usually.
Well, the use of actual physical force is, let's say, highly controversial and extremely rare in most communities. It's allowed only under very specific, debated circumstances.
And this is where Mendel Epstein comes in.
Exactly. A Brooklyn rabbi starts getting involved in the mid-'80s, kind of positions himself as the guy who can help these women.
And he got a nickname, the Prod Father.
Yeah, chillingly so. Apparently, he boasted about using a cattle prod. That's where the name comes from, according to our sources.
Wow. And people knew about this early on.
Seems like it. There was a protest back in 1991. A father's rights activist, Monty Weinstein, was outside Epstein's home with signs condemning him.
And Weinstein was saying authorities weren't listening.
Yeah, he expressed frustration that he'd been telling officials about these kinds of things for years, but nothing seemed to happen. No real response.
Which leads us to some of the specific early allegations, like the Abraham Rubin case in '96.
Yes, that one is particularly grim. According to the reports, Rubin was walking home, grabbed, shoved into a van by masked men.
And then?
Tortured, beaten, shocked repeatedly with a stun gun. Over 30 times, the sources say. Including on his genitals.
Oh, that's horrific.
3 hours this went on. Then they left him handcuffed, blindfolded, half naked at a cemetery entrance. He eventually filed a civil racketeering suit in '97.
Were there other cases around that time?
There were. An accountant, Stephen Weiss, alleged in '92 that he suffered broken bones. Again, no arrests mentioned in that case. And Newsday apparently spoke to about a dozen other people in Borough Park in Midwood. They talked about harassment, threats, even assaults, supposedly by men working for estranged wives.
But the authorities.
The Brooklyn DA, despite pressure, initially decided against prosecuting.
So this lack of early action, it might have allowed things to get worse.
It certainly seems plausible that it didn't deter them, and things definitely did escalate.
Like the 2009 case in Lakewood, New Jersey. Israel Markowitz.
Right. Lured with a fake job offer at a document shredding place. But instead of a job,
He was assaulted.
assaulted and shocked with a stun gun until he agreed to give the get.
And then Yisrael Brichman in 2010. Another fake job offer.
Yes, this time to the home of a man named David Wax, who was connected to Epstein.
And that one was particularly brutal, wasn't it?
Extremely. The sources describe it in detail. As soon as Briskman entered Wax's house, he was punched, his nose broken instantly.
Just like that.
Just like that. Then tied up, blindfolded, Wax allegedly threatened him with a body bag, saying he was getting him used to the size.
That's terrifying.
Kicked, burned with acid, threatened with being fed to rats, buried alive. Just relentless pressure until he finally agreed to the get.
Was there money involved in that one?
Big money. The wife's family reportedly paid Wax $100,000, and half of that, allegedly, went straight to Epstein.
$100,000.
And it didn't stop there.
Yeah.
Wax then apparently tried to extort another $50,000 from Briskman's father back in Israel, even threatening with a bullet.
So it wasn't just about the get, there was serious financial extortion going on too.
It certainly looks that way.
Yeah.
And the level of violence in the Briskman case, plus the international element, That really seems to have caught the attention of federal authorities.
But the violence didn't stop immediately. There was another incident in
That's
2011.
Usher Chimowitz and his roommate, Menachem Teitelbaum. Chimowitz was reportedly beaten for 2 hours straight, non-stop until he gave in and agreed to the get.
2 hours?
And Teitelbaum, who tried to step in, help his roommate. He was severely injured. 4 teeth knocked out, head pushed through a wall, mouth stuffed with dirty socks.
Unbelievable.
And disturbingly, one attacker supposedly quoted the Talmud during the assault. Something like, "Woe to the evildoer, woe to his neighbor."
Using religious text to justify that kind of brutality.
It's deeply troubling.
Yeah.
But as we said, the Britzman case was really the turning point for law enforcement.
Because of the feds getting involved in New Jersey.
Exactly. That investigation led directly to the arrest of David Wax and his wife Judy in October 2010.
And Wax started cooperating.
Yes, he agreed to testify, pointed the finger at Mendel Epstein as the head of the whole operation, and he also implicated Epstein's son, David, saying he was there during the Briskman assault.
So Wax's testimony was key.
Absolutely. It laid the groundwork for the FBI sting operation that came later in 2013.
Tell us about the sting. How did that work?
Well, an undercover FBI agent posed as a woman whose husband was refusing a get. She contacted another rabbi reportedly involved, Martin Woolmark.
Okay.
She and another undercover agent met with Woolmark, and then Woolmark set up a conference call with Mendel Epstein himself.
And they recorded this call.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And the details discussed are just blatant.
What did Epstein say?
According to the sources, Epstein laid out the costs. $10,000 for the Beth Din, the religious court, to approve the coercion.
$10,000 just for approval.
Yep. And then another $60,000 for the tough guys, as he apparently called them, the ones who would actually carry out the assault.
$60,000. And did he talk about methods?
Explicitly. Mentioned karate, using rope, a screwdriver, even putting plastic bags over the guy's head.
Good grief.
He also told the agent to make sure she had an alibi, be out in public when it happened, said he'd do the same.
Covering their tracks. Did they get the money?
The agents gave Woolmark a check for $10,000. The memo line just said, consultation.
Yeah, so the plan was moving forward.
It was. The next step was Epstein actually convening a Beth Din meeting at a warehouse in Edison, New Jersey. This was late September 2013.
And he didn't know he was being recorded.
Completely unaware. The sources say the rabbis at this meeting openly discussed the whole plan. Kidnap the husband, assault him, force the get, all for the fee.
So they basically planned the crime on tape.
Essentially, yes. Which set the stage for the final phase of the operation.
The arrests.
October 9th, 2013. Federal agents raided that Edison warehouse just as Woolmark and 8 other men were gathering. Allegedly, they were getting ready to carry out the kidnapping planned with the undercover agents.
So they caught them essentially red-handed.
It appears so. Epstein was arrested separately back in Brooklyn, and Woolmark's yeshiva up in Suffern was raided too.
What was the official reaction from the prosecutors?
U.S. Attorney Paul Fishman was very clear. He called it violent crime for money.
Yeah.
Flat out. Not, an exercise of religion.
Making that distinction clearly.
Yes. And Assistant U.S. Attorney Joseph Gribko echoed that, saying the motivation here was financial gain, plain and simple, not religious conviction.
Okay, so arrests made. What happened legally after that?
Well, David Wax, who had cooperated earlier, pleaded guilty in May 2014, named his accomplices.
And the others went to trial.
The main figures, yes. Mendel Epstein, his son David, Jay Goldstein, Benjamin Stimler. Their trial started February 2015.
And the verdict?
Mendel Epstein was found guilty of conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Goldstein and Stimler were also convicted. Conspiracy for Goldstein, attempted kidnapping for Stimler.
What about Epstein's son?
David Epstein was acquitted.
Interesting. And the others involved, Woolmark.
Martin Woolmark pleaded guilty. Conspiracy to travel interstate to commit extortion. Shulam Shuchat also pleaded guilty to traveling to commit violence.
And the sentences, were they significant?
They were pretty substantial. Woolmark got over 3 years in prison, plus a $50,000 fine. Shuchat got time served and supervised release.
And for Epstein, Goldstein, Stimler?
Epstein got the longest, 10 years. Goldstein received 8 years, and Stimler got 3. David Wax, the cooperator, later received 7 years.
So, serious prison time.
Definitely. And Judge Wolfson, who presided, made some strong statements during sentencing, said violence is never okay, and the sentences needed to be a deterrent. Stop anyone else thinking they could do this.
Did Epstein try to appeal? What was his defense?
Oh, yes. There were appeals on various technical grounds, warrants, jury selection, things like that.
But the core argument?
A major part was the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRA. claiming the FBI sting interfered with their religious practice.
How so?
And uh, perhaps more controversially, they argued that the victims, by entering into a Jewish marriage, had implicitly consented to force being used if needed for a get, according to their interpretation of Jewish law.
Consent to kidnapping and torture.
That was the argument presented. Implicit consent based on religious tradition.
How did the courts react to that?
They firmly rejected it. The higher courts basically said, no, religious freedom doesn't shield you from prosecution for violent crimes like kidnapping and assault.
So the law drew a clear line.
A very clear line. Criminal activity is criminal activity, regardless of the claimed religious motivation.
Let's talk about the reactions within the Jewish community itself. Our sources mention quite a range.
Yeah, it was definitely not monolithic. You had figures like Rabbi David Eidenson, a rabbinical judge, expressing absolute shock.
Shock at the violence.
Yes, and deep concern about the validity of any get obtained that way. He questioned if such a divorce would even be considered legitimate under Jewish law, which has huge implications for remarriage and future children.
Right, back to the mamzerim issue.
Exactly. Then you had Judy Heiklin from the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. She condemned the abuse of women trapped in these marriages and condemned the group for exploiting them financially.
Calling it a shame on the community.
Yes, but interestingly, she also felt that solutions still needed to be found within Jewish law, within halakha.
So, condemning the method, but still focused on the underlying problem of women unable to get a divorce.
Precisely. It shows that tension. You see the condemnation of the violence, but also the ongoing struggle with the core issue of the aguna, the chained woman.
What about academic perspectives?
Professor Samuel Heilman offered some context. He noted that while force might have been used centuries ago in some specific limited ways.
It's not common practice now.
No, not in most mainstream Jewish communities today. He saw it as more indicative of a fundamentalist viewpoint, quite out of step with modern practice.
Did other major rabbis weigh in?
Yes, several prominent ones. Rabbi Moshe David Tendler from Yeshiva University was scathing. He called the idea of rabbis ordering this kind of coercion flat out wrong.
And he commented on Epstein specifically.
Yeah, described Epstein as unreliable, someone whose judgment couldn't be trusted in these matters.
Any others?
Rabbi Mordecai Willig from the Beth Din of America stressed that rabbis absolutely must uphold the law of the land. He highlighted how damaging these kinds of actions by individuals are to the reputation of the entire community.
And Rabbi Cham Dovid Zwiebel from Agudath Israel.
His reaction was interesting. Initially, he described Woolmark as respected, but later he expressed serious doubts about the validity of a get obtained illegally.
So questioning their religious legitimacy.
Yes, and questioning the process used to justify the force. He found relying just on the woman's distress and a cash payment very troubling, saying it went against proper halakhic principles.
So a lot of internal debate and condemnation alongside the shock.
Definitely. It really exposed some deep fault lines and diverse interpretations within the Orthodox community when faced with such extreme actions.
And the sources mention a movie.
Yeah, just briefly. Plans for a film adaptation suggests the story has had a lasting impact, captures public interest.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. Key takeaways from this deep dive.
Well, first, the undeniable existence of this group that for years used extreme criminal violence, kidnapping, torture to force religious divorces.
Second, the legal system eventually caught up, leading to federal investigations, a sting operation, and significant prison sentences.
Right. And third, the complex and divided reaction within the Jewish community itself. Shock, condemnation of the violence, but also ongoing debate about the methods, the validity of coerced gittin, and the underlying problem of trapped spouses.
It really highlights that intersection of law, religion, and individual rights.
Absolutely. Which leads to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider.
Go ahead.
While the courts dealt with the criminal acts, the core issues around religious divorce in some communities and these varying interpretations of Jewish law on coercion, they remain incredibly complex.
It raises tough questions.
It really does. What does a case like this reveal about the challenges when deeply held religious beliefs or practices clash with secular law and individual rights? How do you ensure justice and fairness for everyone involved when these systems intersect, especially when there's potential for such horrific abuse?
Something to really mull over, a very difficult case with no easy answers.
None at all. A truly disturbing chapter.